Canadians were in the thick of the COVID-19 pandemic, many say they were facing the added challenge of food insecurity. New numbers from Statistics Canada show nearly 1 in 5 Canadians report that they face some level of food insecurity in 2021 and early 2022, with about 5% of families worrying about running out of food and the same amount missing meals entirely. Analyst Sharon Jeep Opal says it wasn't just Canadians in poverty either.
It's not just living below the poverty line that you are at risk, but even if you're above the poverty line, you can still experience food insecurity.
The study found while 11% of families had incomes below the poverty line, 8 in 10 families facing food insecurity were above that line. But food insecurity researcher Valerie Tarasuk says those numbers may signal a problem with the poverty line itself.
If such a high proportion of them are reporting, significant food hardships, then I think maybe there's something that we need to talk about with the line.
Regardless of income, the numbers show single mothers, Indigenous, and racialized families were among the hardest hit.
What it should be is a wake-up call.
For mothers, 48% of those below that poverty line and 40% above struggled with food insecurity, while nearly 1 in 3 Indigenous families sitting above that rate and 21% of racialized families saw food issues. Food insecurity expert Eric Lee says conversations need to happen on how to help these families.
I think that would be some of the continued conversations about how to supporting these particular populations to make sure they can maintain the quality of life and maintain the nutrition and the food security for their families.
When Canadians face this kind of insecurity, food banks are sometimes where they turn, but many say they're reaching their limit. Joanna Windsor with Food Banks Mississauga says bigger action needs to be taken.
Anything from being able to advocate for larger systemic change is what's going to help pull people out of poverty and reduce food insecurity.
Even as food inflation eases this year, the cost of living could still leave many struggling as Canadians continue to face down how to afford that next meal. Sean Prevel, Global News.
All over the world, experts are sounding the alarm about an impending global food crisis.
Food prices are at near record highs. Fertilizer prices have more than doubled, sounding an alarm everywhere.
I think all of us right now are experiencing some kind of inflation and weird supply chain issues. But this is different. The world is facing a food catastrophe at a scale we haven't seen since World War II. According to the World Food Program, 811 million people go to bed hungry every night, and 276 million people are facing severe food insecurity. The reason this is happening is complicated, but I think we can boil it down into 5 big things. The first is a war in Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine are sort of like the world's breadbasket. So much of the global wheat we consume comes from these 2 countries. And during a war, no wheat is being planted, harvested, or even exported. These 2 countries, they actually make up 30% of global wheat. Right now, all those calories are trapped. Okay, so number 2, the price of fertilizer and energy, like natural gas, is skyrocketing. To cover that cost, farmers have to charge us as consumers more, and that drives up the cost. Okay, and the third thing is extreme weather. Across the globe, heat waves and drought have decimated crops, especially in India and the Horn of Africa. Okay, number 4, countries around the world are starting to panic. And when countries panic, they start to limit their exports. And they want to keep more of the food they grow for their own citizens. And this means the countries that need to import that food, they can't, or they have to pay a premium. Okay, and number 5 is COVID. Countries have exhausted their budgets, and they would normally try to intervene in a crisis like this. And COVID has caused unemployment and has pushed millions of people into extreme poverty. Okay, to put it really simply, all of these terrible things are swirling to create this perfect storm. It's a storm that's pushing the globe towards mass hunger. For those of us who are lucky enough to live in wealthier countries, this affects our cost of living. But for the most vulnerable, like children and families that live in low-income countries, this will create scenarios of life or death. Okay, here's the good news. There's lots and lots of ways we can help. Too many to list here. But fixing the problem, it actually starts with not being silent about the problem. I know the last few years have been exhausting, but we can't let the globe be pushed into this mass hunger. We have to work together and we have to fight back.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Speak Your Mind, the program that lets you, the viewer, sound off in the comments, through a text message, through a phone call. And today's program is dedicated to all of you Torontonians, Canadians that are here in this beautiful country and have been experiencing a little bit of a food crisis. And that's the question that we ask today. Do you think Canada is experiencing a food crisis? You can give us a call right now, 877-785-8700, or you can send us a message through WhatsApp, 437-233-9815. Mrs. Audrey, we also have our poll, because this is actually a two-part episode where we are going to be diving deep about the reality and the state of Canada with this food crisis.
Correct, Pastor, because we have a lot that we'd like to share, and we want to hear from everybody that is actually going through this experience right now, or even know someone that is facing this crisis, that is going through it and would like to participate. We have our lines open, as you just mentioned. And don't forget, I'd like to invite everybody to join our Telegram poll, that you can go ahead and scan the QR code and vote on the following. The question of the day, as we have said, is Canada experiencing a food crisis? We have the following that you can vote on. Do you blame it on the government? Is it nothing was the same after COVID? Or do you think price isn't a problem for you? So let us know what you think, and then we're going to be announcing the results during our program.
Yes, we're going to be receiving all of the comments, all of the phone calls. And Lupita, I think we already have our first caller. If you can take it, please.
Yeah, we do. Hi, Crystal? Crystal, right? How are you?
I'm doing very well. And yourself this evening?
I'm doing really good. And we already have the topic for today, as you heard, about the Canadian food crisis, right? Do you live with anyone in your family? Is there anyone else that you share the house with?
I share it with my partner and my boyfriend.
Yeah.
So it's just us right now.
Okay.
But I know, like, I have lots of family who live within the city or in the GTA.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay, and what do you think about the rising price of food nowadays? Is it something that's out of your own cost, or do you see that the prices are normal, or have they gone up over the time?
Actually, for me personally, I've lived in Canada since 1991. I came from the States, right? And I always used to think that the States was a little bit more cheaper in food, right? Cheaper for houses, cheaper for cars, cheaper for food, more in healthcare. But recently, especially in the last 5 years, extremely in the last 5 years, that food costs have soared out astronomically. There's a store that I shop at called No Frills. And No Frills was really designed for, like, it cuts out the frills, it cuts out the extra costs and all those different things and hidden fees for grocers. And then people get to save in that. And things have been going up little by little by little by little, to where a product that I've purchased on a sale would be $1.50, let's just say. But now it's on sale for $3. Right?
Yeah.
And the worst case of it is that it's the cheap, not so healthy foods that are full of chemicals, that are full of GMOs, that are full of preservatives and everything of this nature is cheaper. But the cost of produce and bread and milk, egg, meat has soared. So it makes it much more difficult to actually eat healthy and well. And I'm a person about holistics in a way where I really manage about what I put into my body, what I read, what I listen to, what I consume. And I'm a person who is also I have allergic asthma, and my system's very, very sensitive. Eating toxic food, pre-made food, frozen food, stuff with GMOs, things with preservatives and additives and stuff almost killed me, right? So I had to go to eating healthy. But now eating healthy, if it wasn't for my partner, I would not be able to manage that, right? Before you would be able to, as a parent, my mom was a single parent for a good majority of my younger childhood, and yet she would be able to buy groceries for us with 3 children. Right? 3 children, 3 growing girls, and could do that on a budget, right, of 1 salary, right? And now 2 parents are having a hard time trying to pay for 2 children and themselves with 2 salaries, right? And cost has gone up so extravagantly. And I'm the type of person that likes to shop I try to bargain for deals, right? And even it's become more of a problem when it comes to even buying for sales. A sale would happen at one store and you could go there. But now in ordering to get everything that I need to travel to 6 different stores, right?
Yeah.
So not even just the fact that if my partner didn't have a car that he was paying for out of his own pocket, just getting back and forth on bus transportation and different types of things like this nature, all of it, right? And it's just been going up and up and up. And we're supposed to be seeing another surge in it as well.
Now,
right?
what would your normal shopping price would be? Like, has it gone up? Do you think that recently, like, what is the average that you spend at a grocery store?
So if I'm purchasing for 2 people, right? So I've had a consistency of 2 people in my home, right? Over the different, like a decade and a half. And the price has gone up. So like I used to spend easily, I could even go to I always go to Asian stores. I find you get more fruits and produce and meats for a cheaper cost, right? But even that has gone up. So I went from paying maybe about $250 per month.
Wow.
And that's for everything. That's including toiletries, toilet paper. I've always had a cat too, so that's including their stuff as well.
Yeah, including
And
pets.
now that's gone up to about $500. Easy.
Wow.
You know?
That's a lot of money. And I'm pretty sure maybe 3 years ago, it probably wasn't that much that you spent at a grocery store. Now, what do you think about the food banks? How do you think food banks have been helping other people that have been struggling financially to receive food for their families?
I think that food banks are doing well. I live in Scarborough Southwest in Toronto, like Toronto district, like the outer skirts of Toronto. And there is my partner, my boyfriend, he knows a man by the name of Zuman Roy, and he's created Feed Scarborough. They feed over 7,500 people a week, right? A week. And a lot of those people, believe it or not, have jobs, right?
Yeah.
They're low-income families. Not everybody is on welfare. Not everybody is on social assistance or disability, or who are on pension. A lot of these are families who actually have 2 people in the family, and they might have 3 or 4 children, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, and the good thing about Feed Scarborough is that he doesn't turn some. I've heard of some food banks turning away people who are not residents, right?
Yeah.
Out of country students and stuff like this nature, right? But like Feed Scarborough doesn't do that. And if it wasn't for them, right, there would be a lot of people who wouldn't be getting hot meals or anything. I think they have about 4 different food banks here in Scarborough. So, and that was something that this person even started out of their own pocket, not even something that the government or a nonprofit organization did, right? He's seen a problem and he went to go and try to fix it, right? And so there would be a good normal number of people who would not be eating in Scarborough. That's 7,500 people in a week. That's a lot, right?
Now, Ms. Crystal, sorry to cut you. I just wanted to ask, the same exact way that you mentioned about the gentleman there in Scarborough, what would you say then to people say, oh, but it's just part of the economy for things to cost more? I noticed that you spoke about no frills, and I've been getting the opinion of, because I myself maybe have about 5 months here in Canada, and one of the things that I love seeing is a supermarket that provides everything, but usually everybody says, yeah, you go to No Frills, and sometimes when you go to No Frills, you kind of see the opposite. You kind of do have some sort of frill, because what used to be $1 is now $3, $5. What used to be a deal is now not so much of a deal. Is there a way that you kind of work around it with the salary that you get? Is there something that you do, like maybe a little hack to let your expenses go further? Or do you just say, I'm gonna starve? I'm just not gonna eat.
So what I have to do is I really have to budget, right? So that my partner, my boyfriend, he trusted me to budget. So I literally look at, and I am also a person because No Frills has this thing called PC Points or PC Optimum, which is coupled with Shoppers Drug Mart and a couple other PC stores, right? Like Loblaws and Great Canadian Superstore, Fortino, things of this nature. I literally shop at those ones because I can collect points. So I shop for points,
I get you.
literally. And so then I can get back monies for that. I do that also with my Air Miles card. I transfer it. I don't collect Dream Miles anymore. I collect reward dollars, right? And there's been times that I have not, because I am on social distance right now too, myself, right? Because of COVID and all these different types of things that have happened, it makes getting jobs that is not just a job, but a little bit more of a career, a little bit more difficult to do, right?
Yeah.
Because a whole bunch of people are applying for the same thing. And so it's a little bit of a battle. So at the end of the day, if I hadn't had any of my points cards, if I hadn't been strategically shopping, if I don't make a meal plan and shop towards my meal plan, right, type of idea, and my meal plan is created off of what I have to spend and also what is available in stores. And I gotta also shop at 5, 6 different stores just to get what I need for groceries, right? Before you could shop at 1 or 2 and get everything that you needed.
Yeah.
But now you can't. You have to go and travel through 5, 6 different stores, right? And then you're also spending bus fare, you're also spending time, you're also spending gas money, right?
I like
it
that
makes
meal
it-
prep idea, Miss Chris. And you got to put me on those little Asian stories that you was talking about. That looks like a good idea, too. I'm gonna let my wife know she can make some noodles or some scallions or whatever it is they got at those Asian superstores.
Right?
Miss Crystal, thank you so much for speaking your mind. Have a good night, okay? We appreciate all of your insight. And at the end of the program, we're going to be talking a little bit more about those food banks and where you can get help. You guys who are watching us, if Miss Crystal's still on the line, if you can send us a message now, Miss Crystal, 437-233-9815 about that food bank so we can put a little bit more information and maybe even get in contact. And that's what it's all about. Miss Crystal, thank you so much. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
And if you're watching us right now and you probably say, hey, Pastor, I am someone who is in need of help. Well, stick around at the end. We're going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be having this Saturday. But I want to show you about a food crisis that is shameful for agriculture power like Canada. Pay very close attention. We'll be right back.
Alistair McGregor is my guest. He's a member of parliament for the NDP. Alistair, good to see you. Appreciate you taking the time today.
Yes, good afternoon from snowy Ottawa.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of rain in your home province of BC, of course, that we're covering. Let me ask you, if I can, about what you want to hear specifically from the head of Sobeys on these price stabilization plans.
Well, tell you the truth, I've had a chance over the last couple of weeks to review the documents that were sent in by all 5 companies under question, and I'm actually not expecting too much. But, the Minister of Industry made a pretty strong commitment back in September and October about stabilizing food prices. I think most Canadians want to see food prices actually go lower, but that's what prompted us to take this investigation. And especially we've had recent comments from Eric Laflèche from Metro saying that meeting had zero impact on food prices. So I think we owe it as a committee to do a deeper dive into what was actually committed to, and do the CEOs actually have a substantive plan that is going to result in something lower for so many Canadians, because they really are struggling every single week that they're trying to go and feed their families.
Hey, Alistair, how much of this do you think is real and how much of it is sort of lip service, PR, stuff going on by these top CEOs? I mean, is it your opinion they are really committed to trying to do something, or do they realize, hey, you know what, the cameras are rolling, so we need to be seen as trying to do something?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there are several things I know to be true. Number one, Mr. Medline received a compensation of $8.6 million last year, but he now has employees of Sobeys who are on strike in Halifax, and the latest company offer to them was a 5-cent increase over minimum wage. His own employees are complaining that they can't afford to buy food at the stores that they work at. The other thing that people have to keep in mind is that Sobeys, or Empire, the parent company, recorded record profits. When you look at the quarter that just passed compared to the quarter of last year, I think it was about a 39% increase. And this is all happening at a time when record numbers of Canadians are having to go to the food bank. So again, I think many people can, make their opinions known based on those facts. But I think right now, there is just so much corporate greed in so many different sectors that is driving inflation. And right now, so many Canadians are reaching the breaking point. So as parliamentarians, I think we owe it to the public that we serve to do a deep dive into this and start exposing the structural inequalities that are at play, especially for something that is so vitally necessary, such as food.
I know that the NDP have really been leading the charge, Alistair, on this to try and say, look, people need to understand what's actually going on here. As you point out, some of those facts which speak for themselves when we talk about compensation. Can I ask you what more you think the government could do? And you listen to the industry minister, François-Philippe Champagne, and he's very, very vocal about holding their feet to the fire, demanding accountability, demanding answers here. Again, what more do you think they could do to actually bring about some of that, to bring prices down, to hold the chains accountable?
Well, what they have done already is largely the result of NDP pressure. I mean, they make a lot of conversation about Bill C-56. My own leader, Jagmeet Singh, had his own bill, and so we've actually strengthened that. So I do think, number one, a strengthened competition law and a strengthened competition bureau is important. But I ultimately want to see deeper structural change that is like challenging the corporate deference that we see in so many parts of how our government operates. I mean, we exist in a system where over the last 40 years, policymakers have largely turned a blind eye to how corporate profits have been increasing and increasing and increasing, and yet ordinary Canadians' standard of living just isn't keeping up. So I think we need to take a serious look at how taxation operates in Canada. We have one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the OECD. There have been lots of calls about putting in a wealth tax and excess profits tax. These are not unfamiliar subjects, but I think we need to have a serious conversation about how we start tilting the playing field back into ordinary Canadians' favor.
Yeah, so we're going to hear from the guy from Sobeys today. Who's next? I mean, how many times are they going to come to Ottawa? What's your kind of read here in the weeks and months ahead, Alistair?
I wish I had my crystal ball, but I think I'm not going to be satisfied, and Canadians won't be satisfied until we as opposition members start driving the Liberal government to actually bring in some serious change that is actually going to change what so many Canadians are going through right now. And that's our ultimate goal. We have to start focusing on building a Canada where people can actually afford to feed their families. I think it's a shameful record that Canada, being such an agricultural powerhouse and so proud of the amount of food we can produce, still has such a record number of people who are struggling with the basic necessities of life. And again, that speaks to the structural inequality that exists in Canadian society right now. And I think they need to see their policymakers taking this seriously, but also following up with substantive action.
Alistair, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the program today. Much appreciated.
This $20 billion of costly new spending, this update can be summed up very simply. Prices up, rent up, debt up, taxes up, time's up. Common sense conservatives will vote non-confidence on this disgusting scandal. A year ago, this finance minister told the House she'd have the budget balanced by the year 2028. In that time, she has announced $100 billion of additional debt above and beyond having doubled that debt in the first place. This debt is already being paid by Canadians with the worst inflation in 40 years, with interest rates that risk a mortgage meltdown on the $900 billion of mortgages that will renew over the next 3 years. That's 2/3 of mortgages, with the IMF saying that of all 40 OECD countries, Canada is the most at risk of a mortgage crisis. And now, her solution, another $20 billion of inflationary spending. This after the governor of the Bank of Canada has said the deficits are adding 2 full percentage points to mortgage rates on the backs of Canadians.
What the Liberal government has announced is not a budget, obviously. It's not even a mini budget. It is a micro budget. It does not meet the urgency of what Canadians are going through. It doesn't really meet their needs. And it's another example where Canadians are feeling really disappointed about the Liberals not meeting the urgency of what they're going through. And most of the money that they're promising is delayed for off into the future. And this is the 23rd month that food inflation has outpaced general inflation. And so now finally we've been able to force this government to act. So there is now some clear commitments to take on corporate greed, which is the major driver of the cost of food going up. And to bring down food prices, we've been able to push this government to finally commit to some strong action on strengthening our laws, strengthening penalties, taking on price gouging and price fixing, what we've been calling for a while. So we finally got the government to act on that. But again, after 23 months of delay.
A lot, and Greens always applaud recycling, but there's a lot in this budget that is recycled, this fall economic statement, recycled from previous announcements. We were looking and expecting to see that there would be a clarity around what surplus federal lands and surplus federal buildings could be converted to housing. This is, again, a re-announcement, $200 million that was already announced. It's in the fall economic statement. I pressed finance officials in the lockup. Do you at least now know how much surplus federal land there is? How many surplus federal buildings there are to be converted to housing? They don't have answers for that yet either. Again, a re-announcement for the co-op housing model, for co-op housing rentals. I thought I was finally going to read that there was a program for school lunches and school breakfasts, but nothing. So once again, kids in Canada have a hard time learning when they go to school with empty stomachs, and when they get there, there are no breakfast, snacks, or anything available for them to help them learn. If you're looking at ways to make it more livable for families that are struggling, that are going to food banks, provide kids a decent school lunch, a decent breakfast when they show up. I'm very disappointed that wasn't in the fall economic statement. I expected to see it.
The world is being pushed towards mass hunger, and you need to understand the 5 reasons for the impending global food crisis. And the first is conflict. That's actually the biggest driver here of hunger globally. The second is a war between Russia and Ukraine, and those 2 countries alone account for 30% of the world's wheat. Number 3, food has been more expensive due to things like inflation and the rising cost of fertilizer. The fourth is extreme weather events, things like drought or flooding in different parts of the world, and that's affected crop yields. And number 5, COVID left 1 in 8 people food insecure. And years later now, these families are still struggling to put food on the table, but it's not too late to work together to revert this crisis.
While grocery receipts keep climbing higher, critics are questioning the sudden push by Ottawa on grocers over the high price of food. On Thursday, the Prime Minister announced the leaders of the big 5 food retailers will be in Ottawa to help MPs build a blueprint to tackle food inflation.
We expect to hear from them by Thanksgiving on what their plan is to stabilize prices.
Justin Trudeau and his team ended this week's caucus retreat, suggesting pressure will be mounting on retailers who have seen record high profits.
If they fail to act, there will be consequences, but we'll give them a chance. We're going to bring them in Ottawa, talk to them around meaningful action, and if they fail to do so, there'll be consequences.
That includes the possibility of a windfall tax, something experts say might just come back as a hit to customers' wallets.
Very likely consumers will pay for that tax. So I'm not entirely convinced it's the best of ideas.
Trips to Ottawa are becoming semi-regular occurrences for Canadian grocery CEOs.
I'm going to ask you some tough questions today. All right.
In March, they offered testimony to the Agriculture and Agri-Food House Committee as it reported on the rising costs of groceries. It found the need for transparency in the sector, with CEOs suggesting non-food items account for a large proportion of profits. This summer, the Competition Bureau determined increased competition is needed in the sector, with 5 companies, Loblaw, Metro, Sobeys, Walmart, and Costco, accounting for 80% of market share. But critics say the process appears to be flawed. Food inflation is already slowing. Ottawa only called on grocery store leaders and not food manufacturers, and the threat of a tax is setting up a win-win.
If prices do come down, they will say, look, we put pressure on those grocers. Prices have come down. It's a little disingenuous because they'll have come down for other reasons.
Global News reached out to all 5 companies about whether their chief executives would participate in next week's meetings. Walmart, Loblaw, and Metro said their leaders would be in the capital on Monday. Empire and Costco did not respond in time for our deadline. Kyle Benning, Global News.
Nearly 2 million Canadians are using food banks, a stark number that has Food Banks Canada issuing a warning. Food price growth is slowing, but the organization's Hunger Count report shows food costs, along with housing and low wages, have Canadians seeking out help.
I don't know how much more years of this kind of growth food banks can handle and can absorb.
According to the study, more than 1.9 million Canadians accessed food banks in March this year. That's an increase of 32% from 2022 and a nearly 80% increase from 4 years ago. Some provinces are also reporting drastic rises, with Ontario seeing a 40% increase from just a year ago and New Brunswick seeing a jump of nearly 25%. It's not just adults either who are being impacted, with the study showing children make up 1/3 of food bank clients. Food Banks Canada CEO Kirsten Beardsley says they want governments to offer help that can ease people's budgets, ranging from affordable housing to income support. This month, Ottawa said grocery chains had promised discounts and price matching as part of the federal government's plan to stabilize prices, but grocers haven't confirmed their plans. The end goal is for food banks to someday close, but not for the reason you might think.
We want to see ourselves put out of a job, as you said. We want to see the amount of food bank use come down, but quite frankly, that's not being met with an urgency at government levels, and that's not okay.
Yet as they wait for action, Beardsley says she's concerned there's the potential of having to pull back how much food is given, as some previous donors become food bank users and others are stretched thin and unable to give as much food as they used to. Sean Preble, Global News.
Toronto has entered a food shortage crisis, with 1 in 10 Torontonians depending on food banks for their daily groceries. In response to this, the Unisocial Group of the Universal Church, in partnership with My Little Butcher Shop and Andrew and Shelley Snowfrills, will be having a food distribution Saturday, December 9th at 11 a.m. at 2418 Dufferin Street. We will have non-perishable items and poultries while supplies last.
Audrey, do we have any comments regarding our topic?
That says like this: absolutely, I find myself shopping more regularly, looking for deals just to be able to put food on the table for my family. I have to decide between sometimes even paying my rent or having a fully stocked fridge. These prices are insane and not worth the price that we pay for the produce that I buy. It rarely lasts nowadays. I buy it one day and then the next I find it already spoiled rotten. So that's what Debbie says. We also have Erica that mentions like this: I have to prioritize cost over nutrition. It's not what I normally want to buy, but I have to get sometimes processed food because it's what I can afford, as opposed to my usual grocery list. Pastor, a lot of people are commenting, are letting us know what they think, but I don't want them to forget about our Telegram poll that they can go ahead and scan the QR code and vote on the following.
Thank you so much. Ms. Lupita, if you can, in Spanish, if you can let the viewer know what we're going to be having this Saturday here in our YPG Center.
Este sábado a las 11 de la mañana estaremos entregando la comida, la dispensa. Entonces, si ustedes están aquí en esta área de Toronto, ustedes también pueden venir. Todo es completamente gratis. Ustedes no van a tener que pagar nada. Se van a dar latas de comida, se va a dar ropa para los niños, para ustedes también. Entonces, vengan, que vamos a estar aquí localizados en el 2418 Dufferin Street. Entonces, de aquí a las 11 de la mañana este sábado.
La Lupita is nueva. She's a little new. But I bet you didn't know she knew how to do that. But if you're watching us right now and you're somebody who's going through a tough time, we understand that the same exact way Jesus extended his hand to help a lot of people, we want to do the same. If you're watching us right now and you live in Scarborough, Mississauga, you live in Etobicoke, you live in Brampton, wherever it is that you're watching us from, this Saturday at 11 o'clock in the morning, we're going to be having a social event where we're going to be giving food boxes, and much more than that, counseling, whatever it is that you need. Pastor, I'm in need of some clothes. I have a kid and they're in need of some clothes. We understand that times are tough, but when times are tough, you should ask for help. The worst thing is to drown and to not ask to be saved. So if you're watching us, I want you to write down. We're going to put the direction of 2420 Dufferin Street, but right next to it, let's see if we can put the address now. Right next door, literally right next door, 2418. If If we can start, if you see right there, right, the building literally right next door, right where the D of Duffering is, 2418 to 2420 Duffering Street. This Saturday at 11 o'clock in the morning, we are going to begin our food drive. And if you're watching this and you want to be part of that, maybe you're watching us and you want to donate, you can give us a call, 877-785-8700. Better yet, if you want to send us a message, you can do that also, 437-233-9815. And just so that you can see how God is able to restore, I want you to pay attention to Bianca's story, somebody who was stressed out with so many problems in their family, but they were able to overcome. Pay attention. See you tomorrow. God bless.
These are results of faith.
I began coming to the church as a teenager. As a teenager, I was empty. I felt lonely. I felt no one loved me. Even though we had a family with my parents, but because of so many problems, I was not happy. My parents always used to fight. My dad was, you could say he was an alcoholic. He was an alcoholic because he couldn't stop drinking on his own, to the point that he would drag us with him. Many families deal with that. Many families deal with a parent that is always dragging his whole family. And that's what I used to feel with my dad. I felt like my dad used to drag us to certain problems. We came to the church because of the problems with our family. During that process, my mom was delivered from all evil spirits. We began having a family. Things started changing for us. But however, inside of me, I used to go more as an obligation because my parents would make me go. My mom mainly, she would make me go. So I would go just to please my parents, to the point that sometimes my mom would get upset because I wouldn't go, or I would get there late, or I wouldn't pay attention in the service. So that was my life as a teenager inside the church. When I began having problems of my own was when I got into a car accident, and the doctors had told me that I was gonna have epilepsy. They found something in my brain because of that accident, and some kind of clog or something, it caused epilepsy. He told me I had to drink certain medicines that I was going to drink for life to control the epilepsy. However, I guess the medicines weren't working, and I ended up having 2 attacks. At that time, that was when I thought to myself, you know what, I need to find God. At this point, the problem hit me directly. It wasn't mainly my family problems. There wasn't anything around me. It was me. The problem was me. So I already knew the way. I heard of Jesus. I had heard of God. I seen his miracles in my family. I seen my mom being delivered. So I knew that Jesus was the way. I knew that only with Jesus I can be healed. I can be happy, which was what I really needed. So I began seeking for myself. I began doing the chains of prayers. I began going on Tuesdays, on Fridays. Eventually I was delivered from this sickness. I was cured. I went back to the doctor. The doctor said everything was okay. I didn't have to take the medications anymore. But there was still something missing in my life. There was still some gap within me that it wasn't filled. Even things were going good for us, you could say for me as well, but there was still something missing inside of me. And that something was the Holy Spirit. I still, basically in front of everybody, I was happy. I had everything that a teenager could want. But I wasn't happy at all. I knew there was something missing. Every time I would be by myself, I knew there was something missing inside of me. And that was when I was like, okay, you know what? What is missing inside of me is God. I had the presence of God, but I didn't have the Holy Spirit. And I knew that. And that was when I started seeking for the Holy Spirit. I used to go Wednesdays. On the vigils, I wouldn't stop going. On Sundays, I would seek for the Holy Spirit. At 3 a.m. in the morning, I would seek for the Holy Spirit. And it was something continually that I used to do because I needed that spirit in me. I used to see the transformation in my mom. And sometimes I would think, I want the same thing. I would see the transformation in some of my friends that received the Holy Spirit. And I used to say, that's what I want, you know. I want to be different. I want to show God in my life. And it was then when I got baptized with the Holy Spirit. I remember it was on the Sunday. They used to do a special meeting. So on that Sunday, I received the Holy Spirit. And from then on, everything changed inside of me. I didn't feel that loneliness. I can't express what I felt, but I know after that day, everything changed. I started looking at the world completely different with eyes that I can overcome everything because of that Holy Spirit. I had an inner strength within me that I didn't know I ever had because I was insecure before. After receiving the Holy Spirit, I knew I could do many things in my life because I had that strength of God in my life. So with the Holy Spirit, I had everything. But back then I used to think, with God, I can do everything. Now with the Holy Spirit, before I had the presence of God, I had faith to achieve many things. Now with the Holy Spirit, much more. I have peace, I have happiness, I have everything that I always desired in my life.
Toronto has entered a food shortage crisis, with 1 in 10 Torontonians depending on food banks for their daily groceries. In response to this, the Unisocial Group of the Universal Church, in partnership with My Little Butcher Shop and Andrew and Shelley's No Frills, will be having a food distribution Saturday, December 9th at 11 a.m. at 2418 Dufferin Street. We will have non-perishable items and poultries while supplies last.
Sunday of the Gathering of Faith and Miracles, bringing restoration to health, prayer for your deliverance, to your love life, to your family, your financial life, for inner peace, and a real and true encounter with God. There are 7 prayers that will impact your life and destroy all your troubles, bringing new life in every way. Sunday of the Gathering of Faith and Miracles, Sunday at 10 a.m. 2420 Dufferin Street, 1 block north of Eglinton Avenue, and at every Universal Church in Canada.
Lift up my eyes